Welcome to the SAP HANA Academy. My name's Bob, and in this Live 2 series of tutorials, we're building an end-to-end HANA scenario on the theme of social networking. In this video, we're going to look at how we can create an SAP HANA 1 instance within AWS. In this video, we're going to be looking at creating an SAP HANA 1 instance. We're going to create this SAP HANA 1 instance in AWS. Now, that's Amazon Web Services. Now, there are lots of different methods of creating SAP HANA 1 instances in a variety of different cloud providers. But again, we're going to use AWS. So in this video, we're going to cover the following couple of subjects. Number one, we're going to look at creating an account so you can use Amazon Web Services. So you'll need to enter some contact information, obviously create login and passwords in order for you to be able to create your own SAP HANA 1 instance. Secondly, we're going to be looking at security. Security is very important when it comes to SAP HANA 1 because obviously this machine is going to be available on the World Wide Web. That means in theory anyone can have access to it. So we're going to look at two very strong security methods in order to make sure that only a restricted set of users can access your box. So firstly, we're going to be looking at the concept of a key pair. So what is a key pair? Well, basically it's a file, it's like a text file, which means that in order to access an SAP HANA 1 Linux machine, you need to have this file. If you don't have the file, you won't be able to access the server. So much so that if you lose the file, you won't be able to access your SAP HANA 1 server anymore. Next, we're going to look at the concept of security groups. So what are security groups? Well, what we're going to need to do is open up some ports to enable some applications to use parts of our HANA 1 instance. So we're going to later on create a Windows box and install an SAP HANA Studio on it, which is like an administration tool. In order for that tool to access your SAP HANA 1 Linux server, you need to open up certain ports. Again, we're going to discuss which ports you need to open up in this video. So let's go ahead and see how we create that SAP HANA 1 instance. You'll be amazed to see how quickly it takes. It takes around 10 minutes or between 5 to 10 minutes to create the account, and then it literally takes 5 minutes to create your SAP HANA 1 instance. So in this video, we're going to create a SAP HANA 1 instance. The first thing we need to do is create an account in AWS. It's very straightforward. So on Google, I'm going to do a search for AWS. And then we'll go to Amazon Web Services, which is aws.amazon.com. And then we'll need to sign up. So to sign up, what you'll need to do is enter an email address. So go ahead and enter your email address. And then you'll need to indicate that you're a new user. So I'm going to select new user and I'm going to log into the secure server. You'll then need to enter your name. So I'm going to put SAP HANA Academy. And then you'll need to re-enter the email address again and indicate a password. So when you've done that, click on continue. Lastly, you'll need to enter some contact information. When you scroll down, you'll need to do a security check. So I'm going to enter in those digits. And then you have to agree to your the AWS customer agreement, and then you can create the account. Next, we need to enter some credit card details. So this is what you'll need in order to create your AWS account. You won't be charged at this point. It's only for use for verification, but you will be charged when you start to use your SAP HANA 1 instance. So I'm going to enter in my details now. Next, an identification will happen via telephone, where basically your phone will be called to verify that the credit card actually and the account belongs to you. So I'm going to select call me now. The call will happen. Then you'll receive a PIN. So what will happen is that your identity will be verified, and then you can just click on continue. You would then need to choose a support plan. There are various support plans that you can choose. As you're only using this for training and development, if you're following along yourself, I would just use the basic plan, the free plan, and then click on continue. So when you've done that, you've actually signed up to your service. So as it says, you will, they have emailed you with an updated account confirmation, and then we can start to use AWS. So that means when I go back to AWS, I can actually log in with those details. So I'm going to go back and I'll go to my AWS Management Console. There we go. So this is what you should see if you've successfully created the account. Your account's been verified by phone and you've entered in credit card details. So you can see it only takes a few minutes to create your account. Now what we need to do is actually create the SAP HANA 1 instance. So to do this, we do this in our EC2 category, which are virtual servers in the cloud. So this is the place where we build all the objects needed to create our SAP HANA 1 instance. Now, not all regions support SAP HANA 1, so you might need to think about which region you create your instance in. I'm based in the East Coast, so East Coast is supported. You can see here are the various regions. But I'm going to create my instance just to show you that you can change region in the US West Oregon region. So now that I'm here, we can see that the service status of that region is good. This is where we can create our objects used. So what we're going to do is create an instance, deal with security by creating a key pair, and then we're going to look at creating a static IP, so the IP doesn't keep changing when we start and stop the instance. So the first thing we need to do is create the instance. So we can get there by clicking on our running instances or by clicking on instances on the left hand side. Obviously we have no instances here, so I'm going to launch an instance. And this is all the available instances within Amazon Machine Images. They're called AMIs, so you can actually choose for a whole host of images with pre-configured software on them. Of course, we want to build our SAP HANA 1 instance, so I'm going to go to the SAP Marketplace and I'm going to simply do a search for SAP. Now what you notice is that it took about 3 to 4 minutes to create the account. It actually takes around 3 to 4 minutes as well to create your SAP HANA 1 instance. So I'm going to select this instance. It shows us the optimized CPU usage. So for example, it's got is information here on your various virtual CPUs. You got information on storage, on network performance. Again, I'm just going to accept the defaults here and then click on Configure Instance Details. You can choose to launch as many instances as you want. You can put them into a various group. For example, there's different availability zones in the West Coast. Again, if you want to find out what these are for, there's lots of videos on YouTube which explain how AWS works. But again, I'm just going to leave the defaults and click on Add Storage. Now, I'm not actually changing things here. I'm just showing you what the various options are. Here we can decide on our actual storage. So we can see we're using an EBS device. Here's a list of our devices on the left-hand side. So we've got around 7 of them. But again, I'm going to leave them as they are and click on Tag. We're not going to tag the instance. We can ignore this. We can go to the security group. Now, what is a security group? Well, what will happen is by default, a security group will be created which will contain a list of all the ports which need to be opened up in order to use this instance. Now with SAP HANA 1 you need a few ports. You need obviously access to the machine if you're using an SSH terminal. I'll explain what that is later on. So that'll be port 22. Now there's a couple more ports that we'll need. You can see here by default the port 80 and the port 443, which are for HTTP and HTTPS, are also open. You're probably thinking, why are these ports needed? Well, we use a tool called the SAP HANA 1 Management Console to access our SAP HANA 1 system. We'll need to access the system to do things like change passwords, check the status of the servers, upgrade our SAP HANA 1 instance, and also download the client tools. The way we access our server is by simply entering the IP address of our SAP HANA 1 instance into a browser such as Chrome, Safari or Internet Explorer. And then we'll have access to this management console, which is via HTTP or HTTPS. But there's also a few other ports that you need to include. Now, the great thing when you use AWS is that if I create a new security group, a few ports will be opened up here. So we'll open those other ports needed later on. So I'm just going to click on Review and Launch. You can give before you do that, you can give your security group a name. So I'm going to call this SAP HANA 1 SG for security group, just to show you that you can change the name. And then I'll click on Review and Launch. And that's it. So what's happening now, it'll give you a summary of what is on the instance. It'll give you information on costs. And then it will show you which by default, the ports which AWS have opened. Again, we're going to add some extra ports, and I'm going to show you how we add those in a few minutes. So then I will click on Launch. Now, the last thing that we need to do is build what's called a key pair. So what is a key pair? A key pair enables us to make this device very secure because it's essentially an encrypted file which we need in order to log into this Linux server, which is where obviously SAP HANA 1 is installed on. So this will be an encrypted key which we'll use every time. It's a PEM file which we'll need in order to log into that server. So you can choose an existing key if you've got one, or we can simply create one. So I'm going to choose here, create a new key pair. Now, if I'm going to call this SHA for SAP HANA Academy, or SAP HANA Academy. We can choose to download that key pair. Now, the thing is, it's very important to make this file secure. If you lose this file, you won't be able to access your SAP HANA 1 instance. So as it gives you a warning here, you need to store this file in a secure and accessible location. Again, if you lose it, you won't be able to log into your SAP HANA 1 instance. So I'm going to download this key pair onto my machine, and I'm going to save it. And it's a good idea, obviously, to verify that it's there before you actually click launch, and then I'm going to launch that instance. So if I go to my downloads, we can see here we've got that key pair stored in my downloads folder. Obviously, I'm going to copy it somewhere so I make sure that I don't lose it. So then I'll click on Launch Instance. So as it indicates the instance is launching, it takes around 5 to 10 minutes for the instance to actually launch. So what I'll do is I'll just pause the recording while the actual instance is launching. Now, before I do that, how do you know the instance is launching? Well, if I go back to my instances here in EC2, and I go to my running instances, we can see that one is pending. What's actually happening is starting. So I'll just pause now while that image is starting. So now we can see that instance is running. There's a few things that we might want to do. Well, firstly, I might want to give this a name. So I'm going to call this here by clicking on the name column. I'm going to call this Live to HANA. And of course, what we need to also do is now add the ports that we need. Now we're going to go through this a bit more in depth, but to do this, we go to our security groups. So there's only 3 to 4 ports that we need, depending on what we're doing. So to open them, what we do is we select the security group that we want to add the ports to, which the machine is using. Remember, our SAP HANA 1 instance is using our SAP HANA 1 SG security group. We can make this a bit larger, and we go to our inbound ports. So again, as you saw before, by default, these are the ports that were open, which are port 22 for SSH. SSH is a way of connecting via PuTTY or through a terminal to access your Linux box. You've got the default port 80 open. That port was used for the SAP HANA 1 Management Console, which we're going to look at later on. And we've also got HTTPS as well open. Now, the only ports that we need to add are the following. Now, when you create an SAP HANA 1 instance in AWS, the instance name is always called HDB. And the instance number is 00. So because the instance number is 00, it means we need to open the following ports. So the first is the JDBC port. So we need 3, and then the instance number, which is 0015. So I'll add that rule, and then I mustn't forget to apply the change. So now we can see that 30015 is open. Of course, there's two other ports which are needed for the HANA Studio, which is 50013 to 50014. Now obviously you can do a dash here, you can do things like this, 50014. So we're opening up those two ports. Then again I'll add the rule and I'll apply. Now again, what you can do is you can specify the machine which has access to these ports. So for example, I can say that a Windows box is the only one that can access, the Linux box can only be accessed from a specific Windows machine. All of that's possible, and again, there are videos in YouTube on how to really fine-tune your security groups. Now, because we're going to be doing some development later on using XS and SAP UI5, what we need to do is also open up port 8000. Again, it's 8, the instance number, and a 0. I'll add that rule and I'll click on apply. So we've added the following 4 ports. 30015. Again, if your instance ID is 01, it would be 30115, 50013 to 50014, and also the port 8000. Again, if the instance number was 01, that actually would be, that would be 8001, the instance number coming at the end. So the last thing we need to cover in this video is actually setting a static IP address. The only issue at the moment is that if I was to stop and start this SAP HANA 1 instance, the IP address of the instance will change. This is normal AWS default behavior. To stop that happening, we can create a static IP address and associate it with that Linux instance. This is called an elastic IP. So if I go to my list of elastic IPs here, we can create one by simply selecting allocate new address. It'll be allocated within EC2. So then this will be our static IP address. All we would need to do now each time we start the instance is associate the address with that Linux box. So when I do that, essentially from now onwards, I only ever need to know this IP address. No matter how many times this IP address changes, the instance, I will always refer to the SAP HANA 1 instance using this IP address. So that's it for the first video. What we've created there is a SAP HANA 1 instance. Now what you saw was that it took about 3 to 4 minutes to create the account. Probably, let's say 5 minutes with also verifying the accounts via telephone. But if I wouldn't have explained all the steps needed to create the instance, it would actually take around 2 minutes to create the instance, and you'd have to wait only 5 minutes for the instance to start up. When you adding the ports via the security group or creating the elastic IP, it literally takes 5 to 10 minutes to create both the account and your SAP HANA 1 instance and get it running. Now what we're going to do in the next video is we're going to look at upgrading this version of SAP HANA 1, because this version by default is an earlier version than what we need for the Live 2 project. We're also going to look at the management console and how we can actually upgrade, and also how we can do things like set passwords. Thanks for watching. You can see more videos and download code snippets from academy.saphana.com.